Hello and welcome to another one of my creative tech talks. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different because not so long ago I had a user who commented on my Cables.GL tutorial video, Moni Universe 02. Is it possible to make audio visuals and VJ art with this? To which my answer was yes, of course, you absolutely can do that. So I thought, hey, let's do a quick demonstration of how you might build a live visuals system, your own little application that runs completely in the browser using Cables.GL. So I'm not going to show you the only way to do it, or necessarily even the best way. It's probably just something that, the way that I would do it. And it might give you some ideas of how you might approach a system like this. But yeah, let's jump into it. I'm going to switch over here, and we're going to go as usual into Cables.GL in the browser. I'm going to create a new project, but I think I'm going to create it using something that already has some visuals to play with. You could, for example, go and look at one of the publicly shared sketches, patches that other people have made, and you could use that as the basis for one or more of your VJ live visuals effects machine. But I'm going to go and just use a very one of the templates that Cables.GL provides, and I'm going to work off of this. So this is a very nice cool little thing where you got all these you got like a mesh thing here with it's instancing different pieces of geometry, in this case just some rectangles, and they're kind of rotating. Now, if we wanted to make this thing a little bit more interesting, we might want to like animate the scale of this. It can look a little bit intimidating here, but let's have a look. We've basically got this is the mesh instancer. This is the thing that's doing all the work. It's making the copies of these different cubes, rectangular things. And you can see that it's got an array of positions, an array of scales, and an array of rotations. Okay, so so there's one, it's got these arrays with 3D positions. There's 648. I think that is probably to give you 216 of these blocks. And it'll be the same for all these other ones. But I'm going to take the scale and I'm going to just mess around with the scale here. I'm going to do that simply using some array math. Alright, and that's a cool op that lets you just do operations on all the elements of an array, for example, all at the same time. So for example, if we are adding stuff, you can see that if I'm adding values, then I'm adding those values to all of the blocks at the same time. What I want to do is actually multiply things so that I can scale these things up and down, like maybe from 0 completely off all the way up to 2 really big, something like that. Let's animate this. Easy way to do that would be to say I want to take that number, and instead of just putting a number in there, I'm going to put in an LFO, a low frequency oscillation. It won't do anything at the moment because it needs a time. So I'm going to add a timer here. Okay, and we can see that our thing is doing some crazy stuff. I'm going to make it do something a little bit more interesting later on than just pulse like that. But for now, this is fine. I'm going to maybe just fiddle around with the range a little bit here because this is maybe a bit much. It doesn't need to go from -1 to 1. That's a bit weird. I'm going to do it from 0.1 to 2 or something, right? Okay, so it's going to go from whatever the original scales were of these different meshes. It's going to go all the way from, it's going to multiply those, all of them, by 0.1 up to 2 over the lifespan of this, over the frequency of these LFO waves. Okay, cool. Let's say that this is now my first source. So in my VJ system here, my live visual system here, I'm going to have a number of sources, in this case just 2, that should be enough for now, right? It's going to have 2 sources that I can switch between, and it's going to have a couple of effects that I can apply live. Wow. Okay, I have got 2 sources. One is a live video source, okay, and it's got its own little sequencer. All it does is it just triggers the webcam and then sticks it onto a full screen rectangle. And you can see that something similar happens with the Pulsey blocks. It's got its own sequencer which does all the mesh interesting stuff and then sticks it on the screen. So you can actually see that both of them are playing at the same time. That's not what I want. I want to be able to switch between them. In this case, there's lots of ways you could do this. You could layer them and all kinds of stuff. But in this system, I'm going to hit the keys 1 and 2 on my keyboard, and those are going to switch between my sources. Okay, so with the keyboard input, you have a couple of options for keyboard. There is a generic kind of key press thing that triggers stuff when you hit a key. But what's more useful if you're looking for something to happen on specific keys is this key press learn. Okay, so key press learn, I click the learn button, I push the key that I want. In this case it's 1. You can see the key code for 1 on your keyboard happens to be 49, but that doesn't matter. So that's for the 1 key, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to click learn here, and I'm going to hit the 2 key on my keyboard, and now I can trigger things for 1 and 2. Okay, you can actually see if I focus this visualization window and start hitting keys, you can see the triggers being fired here for the 1 or the 2. Okay, so what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to put it into a I'm going to take those triggers. We're going to trigger number by trigger. Okay, this is a cool little one that has got a number of input triggers, and then it can produce a single number. So I can tell you which input was triggered, and that's useful in this case. So I'm going to take number 1. I'm going to put it not into 0 but into trigger 1, and I'm going to take key press 2. That trigger is going to go into number 2, and this is going to be the number. Okay, so if we have a look at what's going on there, and I focus this window again, or this part of the screen, if I hit 2, I get 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, you can see what's happening there. That is nice. Having this number now allows me to, I want to conditionally render either the Pulsey blocks or the live video. So what I'm going to do is, instead of sending them all through the sequencer which renders them just one after the other, I am going to insert a different type of trigger. I'm going to trigger number by trigger port. Oh no, wait, I know what it's called. It's called a root trigger. Okay, great. A root trigger has got all kinds of different trigger outputs here. It takes a single trigger input here, but it can be told by changing this value which one it actually will send out. So I am going to attach this one to, let's call it trigger 1. This one is going up to trigger 2. We take the one that our main loop one is the single input to this root trigger, and the number that we got from our keyboard, we're going to use this as the root trigger. Alright, so now if I hit 1, you can see that only the Pulsey blocks are being triggered, and if I hit 2, then only the webcam section is being triggered. Okay, so I'm basically just routing that single input trigger coming from the main loop, which you always have in your Cables.GL patches, and it's going to be triggered according to which it's going to route that trigger through to render one of those 2 sources. Great, so I've got my source switching system. Let's talk about some effects. We're going to basically take the result of this kind of input switching, the source switching thing, and instead of just putting it straight on the screen, we're going to render to texture. Okay, so at the moment nothing's happening on the screen. The texture is being rendered. Here's my sort of source switching output. Okay, without the effects. There it is. There it is working. And now I'm going to make a section where we're going to render those things. Okay, so here I'm going to put a sequence kind of at a higher level over here. So one path goes and renders whichever source we're switched to. Another path is going to go off to a section that's going to render my effects. I'm going to make another sequence here. I'm going to do a very simple color mapping effect. So we're going to take the boring colors of the gray blocks or my webcam or whatever, and I'm going to make it nice and colorful. All right. I'm going to take a gradient and I'm going to use that as the color map so that I can take black and white images or whatever, and I can turn them into rainbow colors. Okay, so I'm going to first be able to actually draw something. So use an image compose. This is always a great idea when you're trying to do stuff with two-dimensional images. So I'm going to first draw the image. In this case, the image is going to be the raw input coming out of the source switching. Okay, we're going to put it into here, and this is what's going to go through to my full screen rectangle. Okay, so I can see the output now. Alright, so I'm just drawing the image, not very exciting. I'm going to do something with it. I think it's called a color map. Yes. Alright, I've got my color map here. So my color map needs a gradient texture. So I'm going to look for the gradient texture, that is this. Alright, by default it just generates a very boring texture that goes from black to white, so it makes my image black and white. I am going to try and make something a little bit more interesting, so I'm going to edit this gradient. I'm just going to put some random points over here, pretty random. I'm going to randomize the colors until I get something funky. Okay, yeah, that looks good to me. So we've got a gradient that looks like this. Obviously you could spend more time and be more precise about this, but that's good enough. Okay, so this is now, this sort of arm of things is now my first effect. Hey, this doesn't belong in there. Yeah. This is my first effect. I'm going to color these blue or something, and this is my colorize effect. And of course I'm going to spell colorize like that because I'm a civilized. Okay, then we're going to have a second leg that's going to do some other effects. I'm going to make it a kaleidoscope in this case. You can see, by the way, that this is being applied to whatever's coming in through the source switching that we built. So this is also getting its nice color map. Okay, you know, our patch is getting quite big already. One thing I'm going to do that's going to make it a bit easier to kind of share this final texture that comes from the source switching is I'm going to, instead of having a long arm that goes all, like a long connection that goes all the way to like the colorize one and my next one, I'm going to rather send it to a variable. So you can have var set texture, all right, and that just lets you send this into here. There's no variable yet. We're going to call it this is the no effects texture channel variable thing. Okay, we're going to send it in there. I'm going to disconnect this here. I'm going to break some stuff initially, and over here we're going to var get texture. Okay, we're going to say that we want that same no effects one. We're going to send that into here. Okay, cool. Nothing really changed yet, but this will just make it more convenient as we go. So my second one, the second effect that I'm going to make is going to be a kaleidoscope. So I'm going to also do an image compose. That's just useful. going to also do a draw image. Okay, and then the texture for the draw image is going to come from this one, which is nice and close now. I'm going to send it in here, and then we are going to make a kaleidoscope effect. All right, I'm going to put it on here. All right, no effect yet. You can kind of see that, you know, we're not really doing anything with this kaleidoscope effect yet, but if you have a look over here, you will see that, so it is being applied, it is being rendered, we're just not doing anything with it yet. But I'm going to just organize this nicely. This is my second effect here. We're going to call this the kaleidoscope. Alright. Right. The way I want the effects to work is that I don't want to just I don't want to switch between them. I want to toggle them all off and on, and I want to be able to apply either no effects or both effects at the same time, or one or the other. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, instead of just rendering, at the moment this is just rendering the first effect, which is not terribly useful. I'm going to disconnect that. I'm going to have a stage where I put all these things together. Okay, so before I do the full screen rectangle, I'm going to do another one where I do an image compose. Alright, it's my image compose, and I'm going to draw, in this case, 2 images for my 2 effects. Alright, so this one is going to go into here, and this one, remember the image compose, you kind of work from the top. This is where the result of everything underneath it is rendered. Okay, so put into a texture. So we're going to take this one, we're going to connect it to this one. Okay, so now both of them are being rendered at the same time, and you can actually see that happening there. Okay, and I'm going to make the second one actually go additive on top of it. And this final one we're going to connect to the full screen rectangle so we can see it. Okay, cool. So now I've got both effects being applied. I've got the kaleidoscope thing is being drawn on top of the color map thing. Okay. Now I need to set up the toggling. Okay, so remember in our sources we had this kind of system where we picked one at a time and then routed the rendering through. That's not what we're going to do with this effects system, although we could if we wanted, if that's the way we wanted to work, but I want to demonstrate something else. So we're going to now instead toggle these things off and on. Okay, and a good way to do a toggle is obviously to start with a toggle bool. Okay, and this takes a trigger and it will switch things off and on. Oh, where did it go? Oh, it's down here. Wow, okay. Right, I've got a toggle bool where I'm going to toggle off and on the colorize effect, and I'm going to have another one for the toggle bool of the kaleidoscope effect. The way I'm going to trigger those things is I'm going to again use my key press learn. So for this I'm going to use the keys just below so I've got my 1 and 2 keys for the switching the sources, like so. Oops, there we go, like that. And then just below that on the keyboard I've got Q and R. I'm going to use Q and R as my toggle on and off effects layers 1 and 2. Okay, so this key press learn, I'm going to click learn, I'm going to click Q, I'm going to hit Q, so that one's now learned the Q key. This one I'm going to learn the W key, so that's the first and second one. This is going to trigger the one toggle, this is going to trigger the other toggle. If you want to see what the result is, I'm going to stick it in the title, that's a nice way to do it. Alright, I'm going to hit Q, W. Okay, and you can see that these things can be independently toggled. I'm going to conditionally actually render the effect or not, and that's quite a good idea because I probably don't want to waste resources actually rendering an effect that that's not on, that I'm not currently using. So I'm going to use a gated trigger over here, a trigger gate, for each of these different arms that go to the different effects. So like in here, I can do a gate trigger like this, and this one's also got a gated trigger. And I simply need to connect the result of these toggles now to each of those gates. So this one is going to set the value of this, and this one for the W is going to set the value for this. Okay, so what these gate triggers do is very simple. If the value 0 is set on the number, then it will not allow the gates to be, it'll close the gate, so the trigger won't go through, and if it is 1, then it will allow it to pass through. The system is kind of working, because if I toggle these things on and off, let's see, what is happening? So what is happening is that when they're both on, it's happening kind of as I expected. I can see a colorized version of the image, and I can see a kaleidoscope version of the image. But if I stop one of them, so if I stop the kaleidoscope doesn't go away, it just stops rendering, but I still see the last frame. Okay, so this is not really a problem. I can solve this quite easily. And luckily we're in a visual programming environment, so it's very easy to kind of fiddle with these things and figure it out as you go along. So I think that a good idea would be not only to to close and open the gates for the triggers, but actually to also show and hide the different layers as well. And that's actually very simple to do, because I've got both of these draw image things here, and they have got an amount input which goes from 0 to 1, and that's literally how much to blend it in. So for this one, I know that when I enable this one, I've got 1, and when it's disabled, I've got 0. So I'm going to send this one into, whoopsie, I'm going to connect this into the amount, and this one also into the amount. Alright, so now if both are enabled, I will see them both at the same time. I've got the kaleidoscope and the color map. If I disable the kaleidoscope, I've now got the other one is hidden, and the same way with this one. So let's just see, so you can actually see the two, which ones they are. Right, so here both are on. Here only the kaleidoscope is showing. Here only the color map is showing. Yes, I don't have a one for no effects. We could make that, but I'm not going to do that now. So far that's pretty cool, and that would be a workable system that you could control. You could have your own sort of you could have some graphics being rendered by Cables.GL as a one source, and you could have some live video or something coming in by a webcam or a webcam converter, like a USB converter or something, or a video that you want to play back, and you could do live effects on that. You could switch between the sources. You could apply toggle effects on and off, which is pretty great. I'm sure that something that you would want to do in this kind of setup is you probably want to have some audio-reactive visuals, because if it's a VJ system, then that's always a cool thing to do. So we're going to do a very, very basic try at that. I'm going to turn the blocks into a kind of visual reactive audio-reactive system. Okay, you remember right at the beginning we animated the scale of these blocks by using this array math, okay, and so it was applying a number to multiply all of the scale numbers of all of the blocks at the same time, and we were driving that just using this LFO, so it just goes up and down, and that's why we get this pulsy thing. So what if we wanted to make that respond to audio? Okay, first we need an audio input. we could use a microphone in, we could do all kinds of fancy things. You know, maybe we want to route, you know, live audio in. That's probably what we would do. So we would probably use something like this microphone in, and we would, you know, use some system of doing that. I am going to do something a bit easier for demonstration. I'm going to load a file with some music so we can kind of see what the effect of that is. All right, so you've got an audio buffer. An audio buffer is meant to take a file. I am going to add a piece of music here. This is an MP3 file. All right, that is now what this audio buffer is responsible for doing. This does not, in Cables.GL, this does not play the audio. It just holds the file. All right. So you need an audio buffer player to connect this to. Okay. That when you start it, it will actually start playing, but we can't hear anything. If you want to hear it, it actually will give you a hint here. To be able to hear the sound playing, you need to connect this to an output up. All right, so there is an output up. Let's put it in and we're going to mute it for now. Okay, so we've got this audio buffer player. We can, instead of sending it to output to the speakers, we can also send it to an audio analyzer. Okay, and the audio analyzer is able to take that signal in and can do FFT analysis, so it can pick different frequencies and tell you what they're doing. It can look at the average volume over time, etc., etc. I'll show you a couple of things you can do with it. We do need to give it, it needs to be triggered on every frame so that it can do its work, so we need to give it a trigger. I am just going to make sure that it gets a trigger from the main loop. Let's do an extender so that we, okay, so I don't want it to be conditionally triggered or anything. I just want it to be triggered, and I'm using this trigger extender just so that I don't have a very long line going all the way across my thing. All right, you could also use variables with this. Okay, so the audio analyzer is doing stuff. You can see if you hover over here, there are things happening. It's not that easy to see what the hell's going on here. So this FFT array is actually an array, like a table almost of what's happening with the different frequencies that it's split up into. I think it's split up into 128 frequencies. We can have a look at it. If you look at a viz array graph, for example, you will be able to actually see something that looks like a audio spectrum analysis kind of thing. Okay, so the stuff on the left hand side is the base frequencies, and this is and as you go to the right, it's higher frequencies. What does this sound like? Kind of makes sense, right? Okay, so you also have things like you've got some numbers. So there are, you know, this is an array of numbers because there's one for each. There's one index for each frequency bin that it's putting it into. There's also an entire waveform array, and you can do all kinds of cool things with that. I just want to do something simple. I want to use one simple number value. Okay, so I'm gonna let's have a look at what these different volume things are. There's average volume time domain, and there's RMS volume. Okay, so if I look at average volume, I'm going to put this into a graph. All right, I can see what it's doing there. It's going boom, 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 up and down. I can visualize multiple things at the same time in these graphs. So this is the average volume time domain. Okay, so that looks a little bit different. It seems to be kind of a little bit more averaged out, smoothed out. And then there's also an RMS kind of, you know, music power volume as well. Okay, I think that maybe the most useful one might be this average volume time domain. I'm going to try and use that instead of the LFO to drive this scale here. So let's disconnect that. All right. So we're back to this. Okay, we're going to now feed in this volume into the number. All right, something's happening. It's looking a little bit strange and glitchy. All right, we might want to just change the range of those numbers. Okay, so we know that there's a range coming in that is going to go from 0 to 1. That's fine. But maybe we want the output to be going from 0.1 to 2 or something. Okay, that looks good. Okay, so this is just the average volume. All right, and that's looking a bit more convincing as a visualization if we hear what the audio is actually doing. Right. Okay. So that sounds pretty good. That seems like it's kind of doing something that we would expect to happen from that sort of sound. Yeah, and you can see that we're now getting this very cool psychedelic thing driven by audio. You could get very fancy with this, of course. You could, instead of taking just the volume, you might want to pick a particular frequency, like maybe you want to be this animation to be driven purely by the bass. How would you do that? You could probably take an array get a number, array get number, there we go. Okay, we could get a single number from here. I see our audio file has, we need to tell it to loop. Okay, it's going to play there. I'm going to pick, remember I said that the ones on the left are the bass. So if I pick only, let's say like number 3 or something like that, I'm going to get that, this value is now going from 0 to, I think it's going to 255. I think it's like an 8-bit value or something like that. So this one we can use instead of the volume. Okay, we're going to map it a bit differently because we've got volume values that are going from 0 to probably, well, yeah, it says minimum 124 to, okay, I'm going to guess that it's probably going somewhere from like 60 to 255 or something like that. And we've still got our same output range, but we're now responding mostly to the bass. Which you can sort of tell. Right. And that's it for now. Yeah, I will put a link to a sort of finished version of this patch, this Cables.GL patch, on the YouTube description, so you can check it out. You can remix it. You can turn it into your own program. I mean, of course, there's so much more you could do with a system like this. Instead of driving it only by your keyboard on your computer, you might want to hook this up to a MIDI input so that you can turn knobs and hit keys and turn effects on and off, switch between sources, all those kinds of things. I hope you found that interesting and relevant. Yeah, let me know if you find it helpful.